"You were always too soft to own anything," he said, right before throwing me through a wall. My back hit the studs so hard I couldn't breathe. As I lay in the dust, shoulder screaming, I watched him smirk, like he hadn't just tried to erase me from existence. Then I found out he froze my bank accounts, blamed me for fraud, and my own brothers emailed my clients behind my back. They didn't just take everything, they wanted me erased. But what they didn't know was, my mother left behind proof, and I had 42 days to burn their empire to the ground. My name is Danielle Whitaker, and I'm 45 years old. I run a home decor business from my modest Atlanta bungalow, where I've built the peaceful life I never had growing up. My father, Robert, spent decades polishing his public image while privately wielding shame like a weapon. Even now, morning sunlight spills across my work table, catching the neat rows of fabric swatches and sample boards that smell of cedar. Small victories that once meant I was finally free. My late mother, Evelyn, kept meticulous records of everything, including labeled ledgers that her best friend, Miss Alma, our retired family bookkeeper, helped maintain. When my father fell ill last month, my brothers Marcus and James begged me to come home and help the family. My fingers traced the edge of Mother's old leather portfolio as their words hung in the air. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled up to Daddy's brick colonial exactly 1 month ago, gripping my steering wheel until my fingers ached. The house loomed against gray clouds, pristine as always, fresh paint, manicured beds, brass fixtures gleaming. Just like Robert Whitaker himself, immaculate on the outside, wrought beneath. "Finally," Marcus called from the wraparound porch, arms crossed. "We've been waiting all morning." I gathered my laptop and files, keeping my face neutral. Traffic on I-85. The lies slid easy. Better than admitting I'd circled the block 3 times, fighting nausea. Inside, the foyer still smelled like lemon polish and old money. My brothers had already colonized the kitchen island. Marcus with his realtor's portfolio, James shuffling contractor estimates. Daddy perched at the head like a king, crystal tumbler leaving rings on his precious marble. "Those statements need reconciling," he announced, not bothering with hello. "And the Thompson property needs new pipes before inspection." He sipped his scotch, ice clinking. "Unless that's too much for you to handle?" My shoulders tightened. "I'll start with the ledgers." You'd think I was still 16 instead of running my own business. But I sat down and worked, calling creditors, scheduling repairs, tracking expenses across 3 rental properties. The numbers didn't add up, but I kept quiet. Not yet. Hours passed. My brothers drifted in and out, echoing Daddy's little digs. "Need help with that math? Don't mess up the filing system." I ignored them, focused on the paper trail. But something was missing. Mother's inheritance, the trust she'd mentioned before cancer took her, should have left a trace. The afternoon light was fading when I finally looked up. "Daddy," I kept my voice steady, "where are Mother's accounts? The trust paperwork?" The kitchen went silent. He turned slowly, scotch glass sweating in his hand. His laugh scraped like gravel. "You were always too soft to own anything." He drained his drink. "Just like your mother." The words hit like a slap. I stood up, gathering my things. I'm not that little girl anymore. I found him later in the hallway, a shrine to his ego, business awards, society photos, newspaper clippings. The dim track lighting cast shadows across his face. "You ungrateful." His fingers locked around my arm, grip like iron. "After everything I've given you?" "You mean everything you took?" The truth burst free. I found Mother's original documents. I never saw the movement coming. 1 second I was standing, the next, impact. Pain exploded through my shoulder as drywall crumbled. Dust billowed like smoke, coating my tongue. Through watering eyes, I saw Mother's photo hanging crooked, her gentle smile watching as I gasped on the floor. The magnitude of it staggered me. Decades of theft, lies, control. But lying there, something crystallized in my chest, cold and sharp as diamond. I would take it all back, every property, every dollar, every scrap of dignity. And I would make sure everyone saw exactly who Robert Whitaker really was. I spent that night in the guest room, counting breaths and plotting escape routes. The ceiling fan ticked like a metronome while I catalogued assets, connections, evidence. Mother's voice echoed in memory. Patience outlasts power, baby. Dawn crept across the plaster dust coating my clothes. Just before sunrise, footsteps creaked outside my door. They paused, heavy with threat. I held my breath, watching the shadow beneath the doorframe. I left before sunrise, easing my car down the driveway in neutral until I hit the street. My shoulder throbbed where it had met the wall, each pulse a reminder. The morning air hung thick with August heat, cicadas already starting their drone as I merged onto I-85. You know that moment when you realize your whole life's about to change? That's what it felt like, watching Daddy's house shrink in my rearview mirror. I had Mother's old account ledgers in my passenger seat, the ones she'd kept in meticulous order before she died. Small victories, right? The Budget Inn sign buzzed and flickered as I pulled in. 45 years old and back to living out of a suitcase. But I'd rather sleep on concrete than spend another night under Robert Whitaker's roof. Just need a week, I told the clerk, sliding my debit card across the counter. She swiped it, frowned, tried. Again. Ma'am, it's declining. My credit card did the same, and the next one. My hands started to shake as I pulled up my banking app. Every joint account, frozen. Fraud alerts plastered across the screen like crime scene tape. I had enough cash for 3 nights. The room smelled like old cigarettes and broken dreams, but at least it was mine. I set up my laptop on the scratched laminate desk and opened my email. That's when I saw it. Marcus had sent a mass message to my client list. Due to ongoing investigation of financial irregularities, the words blurred as my throat closed up. Daryl had gone even further, posting photos from Robert's latest realtor mixer. My designs, my work, displayed like family property. The Whitaker touch, he called it, a legacy of excellence. I called Sharon first, my biggest client, 3 projects in progress. Straight to voicemail. Then Michael, Jennifer. Each message the same. We're pausing work, pending clarification. The ice bucket on the dresser caught my eye, cheap plastic trying to look like crystal, just like Daddy, making everything appear finer than it was. Rage rose in my chest, hot enough to burn, then settled into something colder, clearer. You ever notice how fury can sharpen your focus? Make everything crystal clear? I pulled out a fresh notebook, nice leather one I'd treated myself to last month, wrote return everything on the first page. Then I started listing. Properties, accounts, passwords I remembered, people who knew Mother's business before she died. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're on camera staging our houses. I stared at those words until they branded themselves into my brain. They were watching, tracking, which meant I needed to become unpredictable. The Budget Inn sat right at the mine, highway intersection, too visible. They'd probably followed my cards here already. I'd need somewhere off their radar, somewhere they wouldn't think to look, and I'd need to move fast. I was copying down the last account number when someone knocked on my door. 3 sharp raps, like a judge's gavel coming down. Let me tell you something about living under Robert Whitaker's thumb. You learn to read warnings in the smallest things. That knock wasn't housekeeping's tired tap or a neighbor's casual check. That was authority, purpose. My phone lit up with another text. Open up, sis. Let's talk business. I powered down my phone, silent as a whisper. Sometimes the smartest move is no move at all. The knock came again, harder this time, wood groaning against the frame. I held my breath, counting the seconds between knocks. Then a whisper came through the crack. Danielle? Honey? It's Miss Alma. Your mama's card led me here. My shoulders dropped an inch. If there was one person in this world I trusted, it was Miss Alma, Mother's best friend and our family's bookkeeper for 30 years before she retired. I cracked the door, chain still on. There she stood, barely 5 feet tall in her pressed linen dress, holding a thermos and what looked like a stack of papers. You gonna leave an old lady standing in this heat? I let her in, and she took one look at my shoulder, clicking her tongue. Robert always did have a temper bigger than his sense. She settled into the room's single chair like it was her Sunday best seat at church. Your mama knew that better than anyone. Why you think she kept such careful books? How'd you find me? I asked, taking the paper cup of coffee she poured. Strong and sweet, just like Mother used to make. Please. Miss Alma waved her hand. Evelyn listed me as your emergency contact at 3 banks and the family doctor. When those cards started getting declined, I knew something was wrong. She pulled out a folder thick with highlighted papers. But that's not why I'm here. You asked about your inheritance? Well, sugar, I've been waiting 20 years for somebody to ask the right question. You ever have one of those moments where the air gets real still, like the whole world's holding its breath? That's how it felt watching Miss Alma spread photocopied bank statements across that cheap motel desk. See these? Her finger traced line after line of transactions. Every month, Robert routes money through miscellaneous family services. Been doing it since before your mama passed. But look here. She pulled out Mother's old ledger, the one with her neat handwriting coding every expense. Your mama tracked everything. And I mean everything. I leaned in closer. The numbers started dancing. Duplicate transfers, missing amounts, dates that didn't match. Mother's codes told one story, Daddy's books told another. But this, Miss Alma's voice dropped to a whisper. This is what Evelyn wanted you to find. She slid over a trust document, yellowed with age. She set it up under her maiden name. Robert never forgave her for that. My coffee went cold as we pieced it together. Mother had created a trust in my name, separate from the family accounts. But there, in legal type so small I had to squint, asset reversion in 6 weeks unless contested by legitimate heir. My hands shook as I circled the date in red pen. Below it, I wrote, clock, 42 days. The motel's AC kicked in with a rattle, blowing stale Freon across my skin. But for the first time since leaving Daddy's house, my hands felt steady. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was Mother's last gift, waiting all these years for me to claim it. We do this smart, I said, pulling out my notebook. Evidence first. Build the case brick by brick. Miss Alma nodded, that sharp glint in her eye I remembered from childhood. Your mama always said you had her mind for details. I picked up my phone, pulling up the county records office number. Time to start digging. But just as I hit dial, the motel's Wi-Fi signal blinked out, taking my connection with it. Lord, Miss Alma muttered, gathering the papers back into her folder. Some things never change. Even the internet runs scared when truth comes calling. The public library opened at 6 a.m., and I was there waiting, shoulders still tender but mind sharp as ever. You know that quiet before sunrise? When the world feels clean and anything seems possible? That's when I chose to rebuild. I'd forgotten how peaceful libraries could be. Just the hum of computers and that familiar smell of old books that always reminded me of Saturday afternoons with Mother. She taught me that knowledge was power, but timing was everything. The ancient library computer took its time booting up, but I didn't mind. Slow and steady wins the race, right? I pulled up the state's business registration portal and started typing. Within an hour, serene. Spaces LLC existed with a separate DBA filing for Pure Design Solutions. Generic enough to fade into the background, professional enough to land contracts. Marcus might have stolen my client list, but he didn't inherit my eye for detail. I knew exactly who to approach first. James Henderson, a developer who'd butted heads with Daddy more times than I could count. Henderson had principles, but kept them quiet, letting his success do the talking. I need someone who can deliver results without drama, he said when I met him for coffee, studying my portfolio. His eyes lingered on a minimalist living room I'd done last spring. Your father's been difficult lately. I kept my voice neutral. I work independently now. Different company, same quality. Show me. That first staging job was make or break. I poured everything into it. Clean lines, subtle textures, the kind of understated elegance Mother always praised. When Henderson walked through, His smile said it all. "This is exactly what I've been looking for," he said, already typing on his phone. "I've got 3 more properties if you're interested." I was more than interested. Every project went through pure design, every payment clean and clear. But the real satisfaction? Documenting everything. Each transformation got its own folder. Before and after photos, install, dates, client testimonials. Mother's voice echoed in my head. "Always keep receipts, baby. Paper tells stories people won't." Daddy started noticing, of course. His social media posts got snippier by the day. "Another successful staging by the original Whitaker design team," he'd boast, showing off work that looked suspiciously like my old portfolio. Then Marcus chimed in. "Our proprietary look continues to dominate the market." The photos he shared? My designs from 6 months ago, but with their logo slapped on top. You want to know what really got under their skin? The Riverside Mansion, their dream listing. 3 stories of historic charm that needed a delicate touch. When the open bid for staging came up, I couldn't resist. My proposal was pure mother, sophisticated simplicity that made the original features sing. I won. Henderson called personally to tell me. "Robert's pitching a guy fit," he chuckled. "Says someone's stealing his signature style." I told him good design speaks for itself. That night, checking my timeline calendar, my heart skipped. 35 days left to contest the trust. Time to verify what I suspected about those signatures in Mother's probate papers. Miss Alma had recommended a forensic document examiner, retired FBI, now consulting privately. "He's discreet," she'd said, "and he remembers your mother's case." I scheduled the consultation for next week, then settled in to balance the day's invoices. The motel room wasn't much, but it had a decent desk and strong coffee. Mother's ledger sat open beside my laptop, her neat columns a reminder of what I was fighting for. A car engine caught my attention, idling too long in the parking lot. I didn't look up when headlights swept across my curtains, just kept typing numbers, steady and sure. Let them watch. Every minute they spent monitoring me was a minute they weren't watching their backs. You ever notice how copy shops have that particular smell? Like warm plastic and paper dust with just a hint of desperation from college kids printing last-minute assignments. The one off Ponce de Leon was no different, but at least it was quiet at 7 a.m. Miss Alma was already there when I arrived, her silver-streaked hair pulled back neat as ever. She had that look she'd get when she knew something wasn't right. The same look I remembered from childhood dinners when Daddy would start in on one of his stories. "Baby girl," she said, pulling files from her canvas bag. "Your mother taught me something important about paperwork. The truth shows up in the details." I settled into a chair at the back table while she spread out documents like she was dealing cards. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making everything feel slightly unreal. "Look here," she whispered, pointing to a series of signatures. "This is your mama's signature from 1985 to 1990. The flowing script was unmistakable. Evelyn's signature had always been elegant, with a distinctive curl on the E that she'd practiced until it was perfect. Now look at these. Miss Alma laid down another set of documents from 1991, the year Daddy took over everything. The difference hit me like a slap. The graceful curves were gone, replaced by something harder, more angular. "People's signatures change," I said, but my stomach was already knotting. "Not like this." Miss Alma's finger traced the lines. "Not overnight, and not when they're as particular as your mama was about her penmanship. You remember how she used to grade your handwriting practice?" I did. Mother had insisted on perfect cursive, saying it was a mark of self-respect. The memory made my throat tight. "Henderson's escrow officer recommended someone," I said, pulling out the business card I'd been carrying. "Former FBI document examiner. Does private consulting now." Miss Alma nodded approvingly. "Good. We need someone who can stand up in court." I'd already gathered what we needed: Mother's letters to her sister, birthday cards she'd sent me at college, even her old checkbook registers. The examiner's office was discreet, professional. They didn't ask questions when I submitted the exemplars, just gave me a timeline. Preliminary results in 5 business days. Filing the trust challenge was next. I did it under Mother's maiden name, Evelyn Marie Thompson, routing everything through a P.O. box Miss Alma had helped me set up. The clerk barely looked up as she stamped the paperwork. When the court notice arrived, though, my hands shook, opening it, hearing set for 2 weeks out. But there it was, in stark legal language. Current evidence insufficient without primary proof of authenticity. I marked my calendar. 21 days until the trust expired completely. 14 days until the hearing. The numbers felt like they were burning into my brain. "Keep working like nothing's wrong," Miss Alma advised. "Your daddy's got eyes everywhere." She was right. I threw myself into staging the Craftsman Bungalow on Highland Avenue, a property owned by Charles Wilson, who'd been feuding with Daddy over real estate deals since before I was born. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house was a gem, all original woodwork and built-in cabinets. I gave it the full treatment, period-appropriate furnishings, subtle lighting, the kind of detailed work that would make headlines in the real estate sections. Let Daddy see it. Let him fume. But this time. We'd settle everything in court, not in his dimly lit hallways. The post office was about to close when I finally finished preparing the last package for the examiner. More sample documents, plus the notarized statement about when and where I'd found them. "Cut-offs in 5 minutes, the clerk warned as I approached the counter with my certified envelope. Just enough time. Just like always with this case, everything coming down to the wire, but still somehow right on schedule. I'd hit a nerve with that Highland Avenue staging. I could tell by how fast the photos spread. Real estate blogs picked it up, praising the fresh perspective and masterful attention to period detail. One even called it the listing of the month. You better believe that got under Daddy's skin. I was checking the traffic stats at my usual coffee shop when Marcus's latest Instagram post popped up. There he was, standing in one of my previous designs, sneering about copycat chic flooding the market. The caption went on about how true expertise can't be duplicated and tagged half the major design firms in Atlanta. My phone buzzed with a message from an old supplier. "Sorry, but we can't fill orders for your new company." Then another. Nothing personal, just business. And another. The blocks kept coming, one vendor after another closing their doors. I could picture Marcus working the phones, that same smug smile he'd worn since we were kids. The Twilight install at the Brookhaven property should have been straightforward. Just me, my 2-person crew, and a truck full of carefully curated pieces. But when we pulled up to the loading bay, 2 familiar silhouettes were waiting in the shadows. My stomach dropped as Marcus stepped into the security light, Daryl right behind him. "Quite a show you're putting on," Marcus said, his voice carrying that fake concern he'd learned from Daddy. "All these little projects, all this attention." I kept unloading, focusing on the weight of each box in my arms. "I'm working. Either help or leave." "About that court filing," Daryl cut in. "Smart hiding it under Mom's name. Real smart." He moved closer, blocking my path to the door. But things can get complicated fast in this business. "Vendors lose inventory all the time," Marcus added. "Trucks break down. Shipments go missing." He shrugged. "Would be shame if your new clients had to wait months for replacements." My hands were steady as I reached into my pocket, making sure my phone was still recording. "Is that what you came to tell me?" Marcus laughed, that hollow sound that always reminded me of breaking glass. "Come on, sis, just drop the suit. Save everyone the trouble." "You want to repeat that?" I asked, phone still recording. "About the inventory?" They both laughed then, moving closer until I could smell Marcus's expensive cologne mixing with Daryl's cigarette breath. The same cologne Daddy wore, the same cigarettes he pretended not to know about. That old feeling washed over me, that helpless rage from childhood, when they'd corner me in the hallway or block the stairs. My shoulder twinged where it had hit the wall last month. The smart move was to leave, preserve the recording, stay safe. I backed away slowly, keys clutched tight. "Think about what you're risking," Marcus called after me as I got in my car. "Family should stick together." I drove straight to Miss Alma's place, hands shaking on the wheel. She took one look at me and went for the ice pack she kept in the freezer, the one she'd used for my sprains and bruises back when I was small, enough to hide in her garden when things got bad at home. "You're not alone this time," she said, settling me on her floral sofa, the same one I'd slept on the night Mother died. Around dawn, my laptop screen glowed as I stared at a draft email to my lawyer. One click, and I could withdraw the challenge, end the pressure, go back to the quiet life I'd built before all this started. Instead, I drove to the storage unit where I'd kept Mother's things. The storm was rolling in as I pulled up, thunder growling overhead. My key shook against the lock as the first heavy drops started falling. Inside that unit were all of Mother's boxes, stacked neat and labeled in her perfect handwriting. Somewhere in there might be the proof I needed, or nothing at all. The storage unit's fluorescent light buzzed and flickered, casting weird shadows across Mother's neatly labeled boxes. You know that feeling when you're so close to something important, but your hands won't move fast enough? That was me, carefully lifting each lid, scanning her precise handwriting. "Personal effects, 1992, read one. "Photo albums, 1980-1985, said another. The familiar scent of her organizational system, paper tabs and cedar blocks, brought back Sunday afternoons watching her sort and file, teaching me that order meant power. Then I saw it. Her pink leather jewelry box, the one Daddy had claimed was lost in the move. My fingers trembled as I lifted the tarnished lid. The velvet lining still smelled of talcum powder and that lavender sachet she'd always tucked inside. Empty slots where her good pieces had been, all mysteriously misplaced after she passed. But there, wrapped in delicate tissue paper, was something that didn't belong in a jewelry box at all. A VHS tape. The paper crackled as I unfolded it, revealing Mother's elegant script, "For my daughter, if he lies." My heart nearly stopped. The date marked was just 3 weeks before she died. I don't remember driving to Miss Alma's house. Next thing I knew, I was standing in her living room, clutching that tape like it might disappear. Miss Alma took one look at me and said, "Lord have mercy, child. What did you find? Do you still have that old VCR?" My voice sounded strange, even to me. She disappeared into her spare room and came back pushing a TV cart that looked straight out of 1995. Haven't used it in years, but I never could bring myself to throw it out. The machine made an unhealthy grinding noise as it accepted the tape. Static rolled across the screen, then cleared. And there she was. My mother, sitting straight-backed in her favorite armchair, looking directly into the camera. "I, Evelyn Marie Whitaker," she began, her voice steady and clear as a bell, "being of sound mind, declare this. My daughter Danielle is the sole beneficiary of my personal trust and estate. Any documents dated after this recording that claim otherwise are not of my hand." Miss Alma grabbed my arm as Mother held up a newspaper, making sure the date was clearly visible. "Robert," she continued, "I know what you're planning. I've seen the paperwork you think I don't know about. This tape is my insurance that the truth will stand." The tears came then, hot and silent. Miss Alma was crying too, but her mind was already working. "We need to preserve this properly," she said, reaching for her phone. "My nephew Jerry works in digital media. He's got one of those converter setups." 2 hours later, Jerry had the tape running through his equipment, creating multiple digital copies while his notary friend witnessed everything. Miss Alma, bless her bookkeeper's soul, drafted a detailed chain of custody document that would make any lawyer proud. "Time stamp everything," she insisted, watching Jerry work. "Every copy, every transfer." I sat at Miss Alma's kitchen table, transcribing every word from the video while my mother's voice filled the house. 10 days until the trust expired. 7 until the hearing. The timing felt like another gift from her. Arriving. Exactly when needed, just like she always had. By sunset, we had our arsenal: authenticated digital copies, notarized transcripts, and a meticulous exhibit list that would make any judge take notice. I drove downtown to rent a safety deposit box for the original tape, taking the long way to make sure no one followed. But as I stood in the bank lobby, signing the rental agreement, I felt eyes on me. A man in a charcoal suit was staring just a little too long, his phone held at an angle that could have been taking pictures. I kept my face neutral, finished the paperwork, and secured that tape behind steel and concrete where no one could misplace it. The next week felt like preparing for battle, but with paper cuts instead of sword wounds. You know that feeling when you're so focused, even breathing seems like a distraction? That was me, huddled over Miss Alma's dining room table, organizing evidence like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. Chain of custody, Miss Alma kept saying, tapping each document with her pen. Everything needs a paper trail cleaner than Sunday shoes. She'd been a bookkeeper for 40 years, and it showed. We logged every person who handled that tape, every time it moved, every copy made. Times, dates, witnesses, all lined up like soldiers. The forensic examiner's letter arrived on Tuesday. High probability of simulation in questioned signatures. In normal people talk, that meant someone, and we all knew who, had tried to copy Mother's handwriting. I slipped it into our growing folder, right behind the transcript of her video. "Now, girl," Miss Alma said during our third practice round, "when you talk about Robert taking control of the accounts, I say, assumed financial authority," I finished, managing a tired smile. "Not seized or grabbed." She nodded, pleased. "And when they ask about leaving the house?" I made a strategic withdrawal to prevent escalation. The words felt strange in my mouth, like trying to describe a hurricane as a weather event. But Miss Alma was right. The judge needed facts, not feelings. Between prep sessions, I had to keep my business running. My biggest client, the one who'd hired me specifically to spite Robert, deserved an explanation for my scattered availability. "Family legal matter," I told her over coffee. "Next week's hearing might affect my schedule." She set down her cup, eyes sharp. "The same family that's been bad-mouthing you to half of Atlanta?" When I nodded, she smiled like a cat spotting cream. "What time's the hearing? I know some folks who'd love to see justice done right." The night before court, sleep played hide and seek. I gave up at 4 a.m. and made coffee strong, enough to stand a spoon in. Funny how some smells stick with you. That bitter warmth took me straight back to Mother's kitchen, watching her prepare for early showings, teaching me that preparation beats panic every time. The courthouse opened at 8:30 sharp. I arrived at 7:45, watching the morning crowd from my car. Legal assistants hustling up the steps, couples looking nervous about divorces or adoptions. And there was Robert, holding court on the sidewalk like he owned it, laughing with some realtor friend about ungrateful children needing life lessons. My hands didn't shake as I gathered my briefcase. That surprised me. Inside, I chose a bench 2 rows back in the gallery, close enough to hear, but far enough to avoid immediate contact. The morning calendar crawled by, traffic citations, small claims, each one teaching me something about the judge's style. She liked precise answers, hated wandering explanations. Good to know. Marcus and Daryl arrived at 10:15, flanking Robert like matching bookends in identical blue suits. They probably thought they looked powerful. To me, they looked like boys playing dress-up in Daddy's clothes, desperate for his approval. I set our evidence folder on the table, Mother's tape centered on top. The label caught the fluorescent light, her handwriting clear as prophecy. Robert's eyes flickered to it twice, but his smirk never wavered. "All rise," the bailiff called at 10:30 exactly. "Case number 2023 CV 4856 in re, the Evelyn Whitaker Trust." Robert stood, straightening his tie with practiced smoothness. He gave the judge his Sunday best smile, the same one he'd used at Mother's funeral when telling everyone how much he'd miss her, the same one he'd worn while throwing me through a wall. The judge glanced at her calendar. "Counsel ready?" I took my place at the plaintiff's table, the tape just inches from my hand. Across the aisle, Robert's attorney nodded like this was already finished, but he didn't know about Mother's video. None of them did. Not yet. Robert took the stand like he was accepting an award, all polished confidence and practiced charm. If you didn't know him, you might have missed how his left hand tapped his knee, his tell when he was about to put on a show. "Your Honor," his attorney began, "please describe your management of the family properties." And there it was, that familiar smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Well, I've overseen our portfolio for 30 years. Everything we own, the downtown offices, the Buckhead rentals, even the staging designs, it's all built on my vision." He looked right at me. "Some people lack the strength to handle real responsibility. You ever watch someone dig their own grave while thinking they're building a throne? That's what this was. And these signatures," his attorney held up Mother's transfer documents, "you witnessed Mrs. Whitaker sign these?" "Of course." Robert nodded like it wasn't even a question. "Evelyn trusted my judgment completely. She knew I'd protect our legacy from emotional decisions." The judge glanced at her watch. I could feel Miss Alma shift in her seat behind me. "But we'd planned for this. Let him build his house of cards. The higher it got, the harder it would fall. And you maintained these records personally?" his attorney pressed. "Every document." Robert's chest puffed up. "I have copies of everything, properly witnessed and notarized. Evelyn's wishes are crystal clear." Now, I stood slowly, feeling the weight of Mother's tape in my hands. "Your Honor, I request permission to play a contemporaneous declaration by the decedent." The judge adjusted her glasses. "Relevance? It directly addresses both the trust provisions and document authenticity, Your Honor. Recorded by Mrs. Whitaker herself." Robert's smile flickered. Just for a second, but I caught it. He didn't know. Couldn't know. "Proceed," the judge said. The court clerk hooked up the digital player and I pressed play. The room filled with Mother's voice, strong, clear, and unmistakable. "I, Evelyn Marie Whitaker, being of sound mind, record this message on March 15th, 2018. She held up that day's newspaper, the date clearly visible. "I name my daughter, Danielle Whitaker, as sole beneficiary of my trust and personal estate. Any documents showing otherwise are not of my hand, as my husband Robert has previously attempted to simulate my signature." The judge raised her hand, and the clerk paused the playback. The silence felt like glass about to break. Robert's face had gone the color of old concrete. Marcus, my dear brother who'd threatened me just days ago, was suddenly very interested in the exit sign. "Counsel," the judge said, "I have a forensic examiner's report indicating simulation in multiple signatures. Does anyone wish to dispute the voice authentication or the newspaper date stamp visible in this recording?" Robert's attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we'd need time to—" The witness just testified to personally witnessing these signatures. The judge tapped the documents. "Mr. Whitaker, would you like to revise your statement?" I watched my father, the man who'd ruled our lives through fear and shame, seem to shrink in his seat. His hands weren't tapping anymore. They were completely still. "The court will compare the questioned signatures against known exemplars," the judge continued. She looked over her glasses at the gallery, where I knew my biggest client was watching. "Proceed with the exhibits." I reached for the evidence folder, and in that moment, I swear I felt Mother's presence, steady and sure, like when she taught me to measure twice, cut once. Some cuts, she'd say, you only get one chance to make right. The room held its breath, and so did I. The chain of custody folder felt heavy in my hands, but my voice stayed steady as I laid out the timeline. You know that moment when you've spent months building something and finally get to show exactly how the pieces fit? That's where I was. Your Honor, I'll start with Exhibit A, Mother's original ledgers from 1995 to 2018, maintained in her own hand. I placed each document carefully, like laying down cards in solitaire. The corresponding bank records show a pattern of unauthorized transfers, beginning in 2015, each coinciding with allegedly signed property conveyances. The forensic examiner took the stand next, this careful man with reading glasses and methodical hands. He clicked through side-by-side signature comparisons on the courtroom screen. Notice the hesitation marks here and here. He pointed with a laser. Natural signatures flow continuously. These show the telltale stopping points of simulation. Someone trying to copy rather than create. He adjusted his glasses. In my professional opinion, these signatures are not genuine. Robert's attorney tried to object about methodology, but the examiner had done this for 30 years. He'd brought every certification the court could want. When Miss Alma took the stand, she brought the quiet authority of someone who'd kept books for half a century. She didn't need notes, just pointed to dates and numbers like they'd happened yesterday. May 12th, 2015, she said. That's when the irregular transfers began. Mrs. Whitaker came to me confused about missing funds. She'd never authorized moving money from the trust account, but someone had, using her name. The judge leaned forward. And you were Mrs. Whitaker's bookkeeper for how long? 28 years, Your Honor. She trusted me with every receipt, every bank statement. That trust account was her pride, meant to protect her daughter's future. I watched Robert's lawyer shuffle papers, trying to find something to challenge. But the timeline was airtight. Every fraudulent signature matched a missing deposit. Every missing deposit matched an unauthorized transfer. The truth has a way of fitting together like that. The evidence is conclusive, the judge finally said, taking off her glasses. These trust instruments are invalid due to clear and convincing evidence of forgery. The original trust terms will be enforced, with immediate reversion to the named beneficiary, Danielle Whitaker. She turned to Robert, who'd gone so still he barely seemed to breathe. Furthermore, given the systematic nature of these fraudulent conveyances, I am ordering immediate seizure of all properties acquired through these invalid transfers, pending full accounting and restitution. The bailiff moved forward with a stack of papers, seizure orders ready to file. I watched them being served in the hallway, one after another, like dominoes falling in slow motion. Each one represented another piece of Robert's empire crumbling. The clerk handed me a thick packet. These are your certified copies. Property listings, account holds, everything you'll need for the transfer of title. She lowered her voice. There's a reporter outside. Just so you know. I nodded, gathering my things while Robert sat frozen at the defendant's table. All that power he'd built on lies, all that control he'd maintained through fear, gone in an afternoon of simple truth. Miss Alma squeezed my hand as we walked out. The sun hit my face like a wave of clarity, bright and clean. A young woman with a press badge stepped forward, microphone ready. Ms. Whitaker, would you like to comment on the fraud ruling? I felt the weight of the clerk's packet in my hands. My mother's trust finally fulfilled, her protection finally real. All those properties Robert had stolen, all those accounts he'd drained, now legally returned to their rightful place. The truth had done its work in the light. I've never been one to refresh news feeds obsessively, but that evening back at the motel, I couldn't help myself. The headlines kept rolling in like waves, each one bigger than the last. Broker patriarch accused of forgery. That was the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Family empire built on fraud? The local news didn't pull any punches. Sons linked to shell account laundering. That one made me sit up straight. You know what's funny about karma? It doesn't just knock, it kicks the whole door down. By midnight, my phone was buzzing with notifications from people I hadn't heard from in months. Escrow companies, title agencies, even. Robert's old country club buddies, all scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. I poured myself a cup of that terrible motel coffee and watched it unfold. The Georgia Real Estate Commission suspended Robert's broker's license pending investigation. 3 major furniture vendors pulled their inventory from his staged properties. Even his go-to contractors started posting about new business opportunities. Around 10 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Jim, that rival broker who'd given me work when I needed it most. Danielle, he said, sounding both impressed and concerned. 2 of Robert's biggest deals just fell apart. Buyers won't touch anything with his name on it now. They're saying the scandal's too hot. I remembered how Robert used to brag about those deals at family dinners. How bad is it? Combined value of $8 million. Gone. He paused. And there's more. Someone leaked server logs from your brother's real estate management system. The money trail, well, let's just say the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is very interested. That explained the Sons linked to shell account laundering headline. Marcus and Daryl had always followed Robert's playbook, right into the ground. The next 3 days felt like a month. I met with the court-appointed receiver, this sharp-eyed woman named Janet, who didn't miss a decimal point. We went through every property, every account, mapping out what needed to be secured and what could be listed for immediate sale. The market's actually perfect for this inventory, Janet said, reviewing comps. We should be able to recover full value, maybe more given the location of some of these properties. But there was one house I wouldn't sell. You know the one, where it all started, where my mother's spirit still lived in. Every careful detail she'd chosen. Where Robert had thrown me through that wall, thinking he'd broken more than just plaster. I hired contractors that same day. I want everything in that hallway gutted, I told them. New drywall, new fixtures, new everything. Then I picked out the paint, this warm honey gold that caught the light exactly how Mama would have loved it. Standing in that empty house 3 days later, watching the fresh paint dry, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph exactly, more like peace. The kind that comes from knowing the truth finally got its day in court. I walked back to my car, that old motel key feeling heavy in my pocket. Funny how such a small thing could represent so much, all those nights of planning, of doubt, of determination. I dropped it in the trash can at the curb, listening to it clink against the bottom like a period at the end of a very long sentence. The new keys felt different in my hand as I opened the front door. Clean. Right. The paint smell hit me first. Fresh and sweet, like possibility. No trace left of that night, that wall, that fear. Just open rooms full of evening light, waiting to be filled with something better. Miss Alma was coming by later to help me plan the renovations. She'd been there for the worst of it. She deserved to be here for the best of it, too. Standing in that empty foyer, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings, I realized something. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. It's about building something beautiful in its place. You ever notice how afternoon light hits differently when you're finally home? Not just living somewhere, but really home? Miss Alma's heels clicked softly on the refinished hardwood as I showed her through the house. Every room glowed honey gold, the fresh paint warming under that Georgia sunset like it was showing off just for us. The walls that used to trap Robert's shouting now held nothing but peace and possibility. "Child," Miss Alma whispered, running her hand along the new crown molding. "Evelyn would have loved what you've done here. Especially that built-in bookcase. That's her style all over." I smiled, remembering how Mama used to sketch little designs in her ledger margins. She always said a house needs places to hold memories, not just furniture. We made our way to what used to be Robert's study. I'd transformed it into my home office, replacing his dark wooden throne with a clean-lined desk that faced the window instead of the door. No more power plays, no more intimidation tactics. Janet, the court receiver, had messengered over the final documentation that morning. I spread the papers across my desk while Miss Alma settled into one of the guest chairs, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Let's see what we have here," she said, professional as ever despite retirement. Her finger traced down each page: title transfers, recorded liens, asset freezes, the legal equivalent of salt in the earth. I signed where indicated, each stroke of the pen feeling like drawing a line under the past. Robert's financial ruin wasn't just complete, it was public record. His reputation had collapsed faster than his credit rating. "That's the last of it," Janet had said over the phone earlier. "He won't recover from this, Ms. Whitaker, not professionally, not financially." After filing the signed papers in my new cabinet, I opened the bottom desk drawer. Inside lay 2 things: a framed transcript of the court hearing and a sealed copy of Mama's tape. Family armor, I called them, in my head. Protection against any future attempts to rewrite history. My phone buzzed. Jim, the rival broker who'd helped me stay afloat during the worst of it. Schedule's clear for next week, he said when I answered. 3 new clients already lined up. Clean slate, fresh start. Thanks, Jim, for everything. You earned it, Danielle. Every bit of it. After hanging up, I stood in the doorway of my office, just listening. No angry footsteps overhead. No scotch glasses clinking. No brothers plotting in corners. Just peaceful afternoon quiet and Miss Alma's gentle humming as she straightened a picture frame. I'd had a key made for her. Solid brass, polished to a warm glow. I'd labeled it home in my neatest handwriting, the way Mama taught me. Walking back to where Miss Alma sat, I pressed it into her hand. Your family, I said simply. This is your home too. She clutched it too, her chest, tears brightening behind her glasses. The afternoon light caught the key's surface, throwing little golden reflections across her face. Around us, dust motes danced in the sunbeams like celebration glitter. The paint smell was fading now, settling into something permanent and right. I breathed it in deep, tasting possibility on my tongue. This was my future, chosen, not permitted, built, not inherited. We walked back to the entry hall, where I'd left that old motel key on the table. Such a small thing to represent so many nights of planning, of fear, of determination. I picked it up one last time, feeling its cheap weight. You know something, Miss Alma? I turned to face her, this woman who'd stood by me through every step of the fight. I used to think revenge meant making someone hurt like they hurt you. But that's not it at all. She tilted her head, waiting. Peace, I said, setting the motel key down like the relic it was, is the finest revenge.